I was 7 when my sister Iris came home from the hospital, and that's when I first learned what it meant to disappear while standing perfectly still. My parents walked through our front door cooing at the tiny bundle in my mother's arms, stepping right past me as if I were made of glass. "Look at those beautiful eyes," my mother whispered, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "She's absolutely perfect." My name is Kala, and I used to think being the first child meant something special. That morning proved me wrong. I remember pressing my small hand against the living room wall, watching my parents settle onto our beige couch with their new treasure. The February sun caught the crystal wind chimes my grandmother had given me, sending rainbow patterns dancing across the carpet. No one noticed when I slipped away to my room. Later that evening, while my mother was busy with Iris and my father was on another business call, I found myself drawn to our family photo albums. The leather-bound books sat in neat rows on the bottom shelf, carefully arranged by year. I pulled out the one marked with my birth year, expecting to find pages filled with my first steps, first words, first everything. The album was surprisingly light. Opening it revealed only a handful of photos, mostly group shots from holidays where I happened to be included. The rest were empty plastic sleeves, waiting for memories that never made it to print. "What are you doing with those?" My mother's sharp voice made me jump. She stood in the doorway, Iris asleep against her shoulder. "Put them back before you mess up the organization. I was just looking for." "Not now, Kala. I need you to be quiet. Your sister's finally sleeping, and I won't have you waking her up with all this nonsense." I carefully returned the album to its spot, but something made me check the next one over, the one that would hold Iris's first year. It was already thick with fresh photos, some still in their drugstore envelopes. That night, I lay in bed listening to my parents' muffled voices through the wall. They were discussing trust funds and college savings, making plans for Iris's future while mine sat untouched in some forgotten corner of their minds. I pulled out my grandmother's wind chimes from under my pillow, the only gift that had ever felt truly mine, and watched moonlight catch the crystal. Something shifted inside me that night, like a door slowly closing. I didn't know it then, but that feeling would grow into something much darker, something that would eventually change everything. The next morning, I noticed my mother had moved my wind chimes to Iris's nursery. She said they'd help the baby sleep better. I never got them back. The first time I saw my sister deliberately manipulate our parents, I was 13 and she was 6. It happened during my middle school art show where my watercolor painting had won first place. I'd spent weeks perfecting it, a haunting scene of a girl standing alone in a mirror-filled room. "Look what Kala painted." My art teacher waved my mother over, genuine excitement in her voice. "She has remarkable talent. We should discuss getting her into advanced classes." A shrill cry cut through the crowded gymnasium. Iris had accidentally knocked over a display of clay sculptures, creating a spectacular mess of broken pottery and tears. Within seconds, my mother abandoned our conversation, rushing to comfort her precious baby. "It's okay, sweetheart," she cooed, dabbing at Iris's face with a tissue. "These things happen." But I caught the tiny smirk on my sister's face as she buried it in our mother's shoulder. That's when I knew she'd done it on purpose. "Your painting really is exceptional," my teacher said softly, watching my family scene unfold. "Maybe we could call your father about those classes?" I shook my head, already knowing how that conversation would go. He's probably busy with work. Later that night, I overheard my parents in the kitchen. "Iris is still so shaken up about the accident," my mother was saying. "I think we should sign her up for those pottery classes she's been wanting. It might help build her confidence." "Whatever you think is best," my father replied, distracted by his phone. "Just use the household account." I gripped my award certificate until it crumpled. The same account that supposedly couldn't stretch to cover my art classes. The next morning, Aunt Marigold stopped by unexpectedly. She took one look at my face and suggested we have tea in her garden, just the two of us. As I helped her trim her roses, she told me stories about my grandmother, how she'd been an artist too, how she'd always believed in nurturing talent. Your grandmother understood what it meant to feel overlooked, Marigold said, studying me carefully. She left something for you, you know. When the time is right. Gaia. My mother's sharp voice cut through the peaceful morning. Stop wasting your aunt's time. Iris needs help with her homework. I started to stand, but Marigold caught my wrist. You're more like her than you know, she whispered. Don't let them dim your light. Walking back to the house, I noticed Iris watching from her window. For a moment, our eyes met, and I saw something flash across her face. Not quite jealousy, not quite fear, but something that made me wonder if she knew exactly what she was doing to me. Maybe she always had. I found the documents while cleaning out Aunt Marigold's attic. A manila envelope, yellowed with age, tucked behind a stack of old photo albums. My grandmother's elegant handwriting caught my eye. Trust Fund, Calla Mave. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside were bank statements, legal documents, and a letter dated just before my grandmother's death. The trust fund she'd set up for my education contained over $200,000. Money I'd never seen a penny of. Marigold called down the stairs, my voice cracking. Did you know about this? Her footsteps creaked up the wooden stairs. When she saw what I was holding, her face fell. Oh, sweetheart. I wondered when you'd find that. They used it, didn't they? The words felt like glass in my throat. All those times they said they couldn't afford my college applications, my art supplies. Marigold sat beside me on the dusty floor. Your father convinced your mother it was best to invest the money in the family business. They always meant to pay it back. A bitter laugh escaped me. Like they meant to pay for my college instead of Iris's private school tuition? Or her dance lessons? Or her new car? Something else slipped from the envelope, my grandmother's journal. Pages were filled with observations about our family, about me. One entry stood out. Watch little Calla today. She has Margaret's talent, that same fire in her eyes when she paints. Lorraine doesn't see it, too busy trying to shape her daughters into what she thinks they should be. History repeating itself just as it did with her. Your mother was the younger sister, Marigold said quietly. Your grandmother tried to protect her from their father's controlling nature, but Lorraine learned from him instead. When you were born, I thought things would be different. I flipped through bank statements showing systematic withdrawals over the years. Each one coincided with some major purchase for Iris: private school tuition, summer camps, dance competitions. Does Iris know? No. Your parents are very careful about keeping up appearances. A text lit up my phone. Where are you? Mom needs help setting up for Iris's graduation party. Don't be selfish. I stared at my father's message, something hardening inside me. All those years of scraping by, working part-time jobs through community college, believing we were struggling as a family, it had all been a lie. There's something else you should know, Marigold said, reaching for another envelope. Your grandmother left you her art studio in the city. The deed's been waiting here until you were ready. Ready. The word echoed in my mind as I thought about all the times I hadn't been ready to face the truth about my family. But now, holding the evidence of their betrayal, I finally was. Iris's graduation party was in full swing when I finally gathered the courage to return home. The backyard was transformed with twinkling lights and expensive decorations, all paid for with my stolen future I now knew. There you are. My mother's smile was brittle as she grabbed my arm. Help your sister open her gifts. And try to look happy for once. I watched Iris hold court from her decorated chair, squealing over each expensive present. When she opened an envelope containing keys to a downtown apartment, just until you finish grad school, sweetheart, something inside me snapped. Must be nice, I said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Having your future handed to you. The silence spread like spilled wine across white carpet. Iris's perfectly mascaraed eyes widened with practiced innocence. What's that supposed to mean? Gaia. My father's warning tone carried across the yard. Not now. But Iris was already moving toward me, her graduation dress rustling. If you're jealous because you couldn't get into a good school, that's hardly my fault. Some of us actually work for what we want. The laugh that escaped me wasn't pretty. Work? Like how our parents worked my trust fund to pay for your private school. Your dance lessons? This party? Color drained from my mother's face. That's enough. Is it true? Iris's voice wavered as she turned to our parents. Did you really? Of course not, our mother cut in smoothly. Your sister's just upset because she's wasted her potential. We've always treated you both equally. I pulled the trust fund documents from my bag, letting them scatter across the manicured lawn. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, my grandmother's letter, all the evidence of their years of theft. Aunt Marigold stepped forward from the crowd. Lorraine, how could you? But I was watching Iris as she picked up one of the papers. Recognition flickered across her face. She'd seen these numbers before somewhere. Then her mask slipped back into place, and I knew. She'd known all along. I was going to tell you, she whispered, but her eyes darted to our parents, seeking their approval even now. The fairy lights suddenly felt suffocating, mocking. All these people celebrating another lie, another perfect moment in the perfect life my family had built on the ruins of mine. I turned to leave, but Iris caught my wrist. Wait, we can fix this. Mom and Dad will make it right, won't you? My mother was already moving to damage control, gathering the scattered papers. Let's discuss this later as a family. But we'd never been a family. We'd been a carefully constructed illusion, and I was done playing my part. There won't be a later, I said, and walked away from their perfectly lit lies. The key to my grandmother's art studio felt heavy in my hand as I stood outside the downtown building. 3 weeks had passed since Iris's graduation party, and my phone was still buzzing with messages I refused to read. But this morning's text from Iris was different. I found Mom's old financial records. You need to see these. I pushed open the studio door, dust motes dancing in the morning light. Canvases lined the walls, each one telling a story I was only beginning to understand. My grandmother's last painting caught my eye, a woman breaking free from chains that looked suspiciously like family photographs. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. Your sister is trying to help. Stop being difficult and come home. I started cleaning instead of responding, uncovering supplies and possibilities beneath years of neglect. Behind a stack of frames, I found a small safe. Combination, my birth date, clicked open on the first try. Inside was another journal, newer than the one I'd found at Aunt Marigold's. The last entry was dated just weeks before my grandmother's death. Lorraine's doing to Calla what her father did to her. The cycle continues. The trust fund isn't enough, I should have done more. You did more than you know. I spun around. Aunt Marigold stood in the doorway, holding a folder. Your grandmother left something else. Legal documents proving your parents' misuse of the trust fund. She was building a case before she died. My hand shook as I read through the papers. They didn't just take my college fund. They've been embezzling from the family business too, using Iris's name on fake accounts. That's what your sister found, Marigold said quietly. She came to me yesterday, scared. Your parents have been using her identity since she turned 18. The revelation hit like a physical blow. Iris wasn't just complicit, she was another kind of victim. My phone lit up with a final message from my mother. If you pursue this, you'll destroy this family. Is that what you want? I looked around the studio, at my grandmother's art telling stories of broken chains and found freedom. The space that could be mine if I was brave enough to claim it. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow, Marigold said. Your grandmother kept detailed records. We can fight this. The word fight echoed in my mind. Not for revenge anymore, but for justice. For the truth my grandmother tried to expose. For Iris, trapped in golden handcuffs she might not even recognize. They'll never forgive me, I said, touching one of the dusty canvases. Marigold's smile was sad but determined. Maybe it's time to stop seeking their forgiveness and start forgiving yourself. I picked up a paintbrush, feeling its familiar weight. It was time to paint my own story. The family dinner was my mother's idea. To clear the air, she'd said, as if decades of manipulation could be swept away over pot roast and small talk. I brought my grandmother's documents in a manila envelope, tucked safely in my bag. Aunt Marigold sat beside me, a silent guardian. "I've been thinking," my mother announced, cutting her meat with precise strokes. "We could use your help at the company, Calla. A fresh start for all of us." I set down my fork. "You mean like the fresh start you gave Iris? Using her identity for fraudulent accounts?" Clatter of silverware stopped. My father's face reddened. "That's a serious accusation." "It's not an accusation when I have proof." I pulled out the envelope, but Iris reached for it first. "Don't," she whispered. "Please." "They promised to fix everything." "Like they fixed my trust fund?" The words tasted bitter. "Or grandmother's art studio." "That studio was a waste," my mother snapped. "Just like your art classes. We did what was best for this family." "Best for who?" I spread the documents across the table, watching their faces. "Grandmother was building a case against you before she died. She knew what you were doing." My father's laugh was ugly. "And who's going to believe you now? Years later? You're just bitter because you couldn't succeed on your own." "I never got the chance to try." I turned to Iris. "And neither did you. They've been controlling both of us, just in different ways." "Enough!" My mother stood, her chair scraping back. "If you pursue this, you'll lose everything. Your place in this family, your inheritance." "What inheritance?" "You've already taken everything." "Not everything." My father's voice turned cold. "That studio?" One phone call and the building's historical status could be reconsidered. Demolition's so common downtown these days. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Aunt Marigold reached for my hand under the table, but I pulled away, standing. "You'd destroy grandmother's studio just to punish me?" "We be protecting this family," my mother said. "Like we always have." I looked at Iris, seeing real fear in her eyes now. She was trapped, I realized. Just as trapped as I'd been, maybe more. "The lawyers' meeting is tomorrow," I said quietly. "I'll give you until then to come clean. After that, I can't protect any of you." "You ungrateful!" My father started to rise, but Iris's voice cut through. "I'll go with you." The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's face went white. "Iris, don't you dare." But my sister was already standing, shaking. "I'm tired of being your puppet." As we walked out together, leaving our parents' threats behind, I realized this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about breaking free, both of us. The demolition notice was taped to the studio door when I arrived. My father had made good on his threat, but he'd underestimated one thing: I wasn't alone anymore. Iris stood beside me, her hand shaking as she filmed the notice with her phone. They moved fast. "The company board meeting isn't for another hour." "They're scared." I unlocked the door, breathing in the familiar scent of oil paint and possibility. "Did you bring the files?" She nodded, pulling out a USB drive. "Everything. Count numbers, forged signatures, even emails about grandmother's trust fund. Mom's going to know it was me." "You can still back out." "No." Her voice strengthened. "I've been backing out my whole life. That's how they kept control." We spent the next hour preparing, spreading evidence across my grandmother's old workbench like battle plans. Aunt Marigold arrived with our lawyer just as my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Last chance to be reasonable. The board meeting was held in a glass-walled conference room, my parents' kingdom on the 20th floor. As we walked in, my father's face flickered with something like fear before hardening. "This is a private meeting," he started, but our lawyer stepped forward. "Not anymore." not with evidence of fraud involving company assets. My mother's perfectly manicured nails dug into the conference table. Iris, sweetheart, what are you doing? Telling the truth. My sister's voice wavered but held. About everything. The next 30 minutes stripped away decades of lies. Bank statements, forged documents, my grandmother's journal entries. With each revelation, my parents' carefully constructed facade crumbled. We did what was necessary, my father finally exploded, to maintain our position, our lifestyle. My position, Iris cut in. My identity. My sister's future. All sacrificed for your lifestyle. Everything we did was for this family. My mother's control finally shattered. We made you both who you are. No. I pulled out my grandmother's last painting, unrolling it across the table. You tried to make us what you wanted, but we're choosing who we are now. The board members whispered among themselves. Our lawyer laid out the options: resignation, full restitution, or criminal charges. My father reached for his checkbook, ever practical. Name your price. It was never about money. I stood, feeling stronger than I had in years. It was about the truth. And now everyone knows it. As we left the conference room, my mother called out one last time. You'll regret this. Both of you. Iris paused, looking back. No, Mom. The only thing I regret is not seeing it sooner. Sighed, the demolition notice fluttered in the wind, already becoming yesterday's threat. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, standing between my sister and my aunt, I finally felt visible. And this time, I was seen for exactly who I was. 6 months after the board meeting, I stood in my grandmother's studio, now my studio, preparing for my first gallery showing. The walls were alive with color, my paintings telling stories of shadows and light, of breaking free and finding strength. The bell above the door chimed. Iris walked in, looking different, softer somehow, without our parents' expectations weighing her down. She carried a small package wrapped in brown paper. I found this while cleaning out my apartment, she said, handing it to me. Mom must have hidden it years ago. Inside was my crystal wind chime, the one they'd taken for Iris's nursery. The crystals caught the afternoon light, sending rainbow patterns dancing across my newest painting, a portrait of two sisters, their faces half in shadow, half in light. It's strange, Iris said, studying the painting. I always thought I was the lucky one, the favorite. But they were trapping me too, weren't they? Just with golden chains instead of invisible ones. I hung the wind chime in the window where it belonged. Have you heard from them? They're selling the house, moving somewhere smaller after the restitution payments. She paused. Mom asked about you. What did you tell her? The truth. That you're thriving without them. Aunt Marigold arrived with tea, a tradition we'd started for our Sunday afternoons together. As she set out the cups, I noticed her watching us, the sisters we were becoming, so different from the sisters we'd been. Your grandmother would be proud, she said. Not just of the art, but of both of you. Standing up for yourselves, for each other. I touched the wind chime gently, setting it in motion. I used to dream about revenge, about making them feel as small as they made me feel. And now? Iris asked quietly. Now I know the best revenge was becoming who I was meant to be all along. I gestured to the paintings around us. Everything they tried to dim just made the colors brighter. Later, after they'd left, I found a note tucked into my grandmother's journal, recent in my mother's handwriting. I see you now. I'm sorry I didn't before. I didn't respond. Some bridges can't be rebuilt, and some shouldn't be. But as I worked late into the evening, adding final touches to my paintings, I felt at peace with that truth. The wind chime tinkled softly, its sound no longer a reminder of loss, but of everything I'd found instead. My last painting of the series showed a familiar scene, a little girl standing alone in a mirror-filled room. But now, in every reflection, she was smiling, strong, and unmistakably herself. Sometimes the best endings aren't about forgiveness or revenge, but about finally seeing yourself clearly in all those reflecting surfaces and liking who you've become.